1. The 20-year Cold War, when alpha males collide. Tiger Woods and Phil Mickelson spent 2 decades as the biggest stars in golf while barely tolerating each other's existence. Their rivalry wasn't built on dramatic confrontations or public feuds. It was constructed from 20 years of calculated distance, professional courtesy, and barely concealed animosity. They were alpha males forced to share the same stage, and neither was comfortable with the arrangement. The most telling evidence of their relationship was what didn't happen. For over a decade, they rarely played practice rounds together, despite being the 2 most prominent players on tour. When paired together in tournaments, their interactions were polite but minimal. At the 2004 Ryder Cup, their partnership was such a disaster that Captain Hal Sutton never paired them again. The tension occasionally surfaced in public. In 2003, Mickelson made pointed comments about Tiger's equipment, suggesting that his success came from superior technology rather than superior skill. Tiger's response was typically cold. He simply won more tournaments and let his play do the talking. The psychological gamesmanship was subtle but constant. Their rivalry represented a clash of personalities as much as playing styles. Tiger was obsessively private and intensely focused. Phil was gregarious and seemed to enjoy the social aspects of professional golf. Tiger won more majors, but Phil won more fans. Neither man could claim complete victory over the other, which may have been what bothered them most. The relationship eventually thawed in their later years, but for most of their careers, they maintained a professional distance that spoke volumes about their true feelings toward each other. 2. The King versus the Golden Bear, when crowds turned vicious. Arnold Palmer and Jack Nicklaus didn't just compete for trophies. They battled for the soul of American golf, and the crowds picked sides with brutal intensity. The defining moment came at the 1962 U.S. Open playoff at Oakmont Country Club, just 40 miles from Palmer's hometown of Latrobe, Pennsylvania. This wasn't neutral ground. It was Palmer territory, and 22-year-old Nicklaus was the unwelcome invader. The crowd didn't just cheer for Palmer, they actively tormented Nicklaus. Fat Jack chants echoed across the course throughout the 18-hole playoff. Spectators hurled personal insults about his weight, his youth, and his audacity to challenge their beloved king. Palmer's army had turned into something darker, a mob determined to intimidate the young challenger into submission. But Nicklaus didn't crack. He took an early lead and never relinquished it, defeating Palmer by 3 strokes in front of a hostile crowd that grew quieter with each birdie. The victory marked more than just another tournament win. It was the moment golf's power structure shifted. Palmer remained beloved, but Nicklaus had proven he could win anywhere, against anyone, under any circumstances. The rivalry would span decades, but it was never quite the same after Oakmont. Palmer's army learned that day that their hero was mortal, and Nicklaus discovered that greatness sometimes requires conquering more than just the course. You have to conquer the crowd's hatred too. 3. The Collapse Artist. When Norman met his match. Greg Norman was the most talented golfer never to win multiple majors, and Nick Faldo was the reason why. Their rivalry was built on a simple, brutal dynamic. Norman would put himself in position to win, and Faldo would find a way to break his heart. The most devastating example came at the 1996 Masters, where Norman entered the final round with a 6-shot lead and left Augusta National as a broken man. Faldo played the round of his life, shooting 67 while Norman imploded to a 78. But it wasn't just the scores that told the story. It was the way Faldo methodically dismantled Norman's confidence. Every time Norman made a mistake, Faldo was there to capitalize. Every time Norman tried to recover, Faldo applied more pressure. By the end, Norman was so rattled he could barely hold his putter steady. The psychological warfare had started years earlier. At the 1990 Open Championship at St. Andrews, Faldo won his 2nd consecutive Open title while Norman struggled to contend, finishing well back in the field. The pattern was established. Norman would build leads in major championships, and Faldo would hunt him down with the patience of a predator stalking wounded prey. Faldo's approach was calculated cruelty disguised as clinical precision. He once said his goal was to put a little heat on Norman, knowing that the Australian's emotional nature made him vulnerable under pressure. Norman won 91 tournaments worldwide, but only 2 majors, largely because whenever he was in contention, Faldo seemed to be lurking nearby, ready to deliver another crushing blow. If you're loving this video, subscribe now and help us hit 5,000 golf fans by month's end. 4. Ice and Fire, the coldest rivalry in golf history. Ben Hogan and Sam Snead were polar opposites who shared one thing in common. They couldn't stand each other. Hogan was methodical, obsessive, and humorless about golf. Snead was natural, charismatic, and played with an easy smile. Their mutual dislike was an open secret that lasted their entire careers, hidden behind a veneer of professional courtesy. The tension crystallized at the 1954 Masters, where they met in an 18-hole playoff for the green jacket. Hogan had already won the Masters once and desperately wanted another. Snead was seeking his third Masters victory, having previously won in 1949 and 1952, and was equally determined to add another green jacket to his collection. They played in virtual silence, acknowledging each other only when absolutely necessary. Snead won by one stroke, but there was no congratulatory handshake, no friendly words, just a cold nod and a quick exit. Their relationship never warmed. Hogan believed golf was a science that required total dedication and perfect technique. Snead thought it was a game that should be enjoyed, relying on natural ability over endless practice. They represented two different philosophies of golf, and neither could respect the other's approach. Even in retirement, they maintained their distance. When golf historians tried to arrange joint interviews or appearances, both men politely declined. They had spent decades as the two greatest players of their generation, but they finished their careers exactly as they started, as strangers who happened to play the same game. 5. War by the Shore. When nationalism turned nasty, Ballesteros and Paul Azinger turned the 1991 Ryder Cup at Kiowa Island into a personal battlefield that nearly destroyed the event's reputation for sportsmanship. Their feud began 2 years earlier and escalated into accusations of cheating, gamesmanship, and unsportsmanlike conduct that made headlines around the world. The animosity started at the 1989 Ryder Cup, where Azinger accused Ballesteros of coughing during his backswing and changing balls illegally to gain an advantage. Seve fired back, suggesting that American players were poor sports who couldn't handle losing. What should have been competitive banter turned into genuine hatred fueled by national pride and personal ego. At Kiowa Island, their singles match became a microcosm of everything wrong with modern Ryder Cup competition. They argued over ball marks, disputed rulings, and glared at each other with undisguised contempt. Azinger later admitted he wanted to beat Seve's brains out, while Ballesteros accused his opponent of gamesmanship and poor sportsmanship. The match went to the 18th hole, where Azinger won to help secure America's victory. But the real damage was to the Ryder Cup's reputation. Their feud had turned a gentleman's competition into something ugly and personal. The event became known as the War by the Shore, and much of the blame fell on two men who let nationalism and personal animosity override sportsmanship and respect. 6. The Duel in the Sun, when Watson broke the unbreakable. Jack Nicklaus was supposed to be unbeatable in major championships. He had the perfect temperament, the perfect swing, and the perfect closing ability. Then Tom Watson showed up and proved that even legends have a weakness. Their rivalry reached its peak during the 1977 Open Championship at Turnberry, in what became known as the Duel in the Sun. For 2 days, Nicklaus and Watson played in the final group, matching each other shot for shot. Nicklaus shot 65, 66 on the weekend. In any other tournament against any other player, that would have been enough. But Watson answered with 65, including a final round performance that left even Nicklaus shaking his head in admiration. The Golden Bear had been outplayed at his own game. This wasn't a one-time occurrence. Watson developed an uncanny ability to rise to his highest level precisely when facing Nicklaus. At the 1982 US Open at Pebble Beach, Watson chipped in from the rough on the 17th hole, pumping his fist as Nicklaus watched his chances evaporate. The psychological impact was devastating. For the first time in his career, Nicklaus had met someone who thrived under the same pressure that crushed other competitors. Watson finished with an 8-4 record against Nicklaus in major championships where both were serious contenders. That statistic tells the story of the only man who consistently broke the unbreakable Golden Bear when it mattered most. 7. The upset that shattered a legend. When Palmer's army went silent. Billy Casper wasn't supposed to beat Arnold Palmer at the 1966 US Open. Palmer led by 7 strokes with 9 holes to play at Olympic Club, and his army of fans was already celebrating another major championship. Then Casper staged one of the greatest comebacks in golf history, and Palmer's aura of invincibility cracked forever. Palmer's collapse was as dramatic as it was unexpected. He bogeyed 5 of the final 9 holes while Casper played steady, methodical golf. The crowd, which had been raucous in support of their hero, grew quieter with each Palmer mistake. By the time they reached the 18th tee tide, the silence was deafening. The 18-hole playoff the next day was even more painful for Palmer supporters. Casper took control early and never let Palmer back into the match, winning by 4 strokes. The man who had seemed destined for greatness was reduced to a frustrated figure, unable to recapture the magic that had made him America's golf hero. The loss marked a turning point in Palmer's career and in golf history. Palmer would never win another major championship, and the sport began its transition from the charismatic Palmer era to the methodical Nicklaus dynasty. Casper had proven that even legends could be beaten by patience, precision, and mental toughness. Palmer's army learned a harsh lesson that day. Their hero was human after all, and sometimes the quiet, steady player beats the swashbuckling star when it matters most. 8. The perfectionist versus the natural. When styles collide. Johnny Miller and Tom Weiskopf represented 2 completely different approaches to golf excellence, and their rivalry in the 1970s showcased the eternal debate between natural talent and relentless preparation. Miller was the hot streak artist who could shoot 63 in a major championship. Weiskopf was the consistent perfectionist who never seemed to have an off day. Miller's game was built on confidence and momentum. When he was hot, he was untouchable. His 1973 US Open victory at Oakmont featured a final round 63 that many considered the greatest round in major championship history. But when his confidence wavered, he could struggle to break par. Weiskopf found this inconsistency maddening and often criticized Miller's mental approach to the game. Weiskopf, meanwhile, was the model of consistency. He finished second in major championships 4 times and contended in dozens more, but his perfectionist nature often prevented him from closing out victories. Miller once said that Weiskopf thought too much and needed to trust his natural ability more. Weiskopf countered that Miller was too streaky and needed more discipline in his preparation. Their philosophical differences created tension that extended beyond individual tournaments. Miller's spectacular highs made Weiskopf's steady excellence seem boring by comparison. Weiskopf's consistency made Miller's hot and cold performances seem unreliable. Both men were Hall of Fame players, but they could never respect each other's methods. The rivalry represented a fundamental question about golf. Is it better to be brilliant occasionally or very good consistently? Neither man could definitively answer that question, which may have been what frustrated them most about each other. 9. The European Civil War. Creative genius versus cold machine. Seve Ballesteros and Nick Faldo represented 2 different visions of European golf, and their rivalry split the continent down the middle. Seve was the creative genius who played by feel and inspiration. Faldo was the methodical perfectionist who rebuilt his swing and his entire approach to the game. They couldn't have been more different, and they couldn't stand each other's methods. The tension played out most dramatically in Ryder Cup team rooms, where both men wanted to be the undisputed leader of European golf. Seve believed in passion, flair, and playing with your heart. Faldo trusted in preparation, precision, and eliminating variables. Their philosophical differences created a Cold War that lasted throughout the 1980s and 1990s. On the course, their contrasting styles made for compelling theater. Seve would pull off impossible shots from impossible lies, celebrating with the joy of a child. Faldo would grind out pars with mechanical efficiency, showing no emotion regardless of the situation. European fans were forced to choose between the magician and the machine. The rivalry extended beyond individual tournaments to their battle for European Tour Order of Merit titles and major championships. Each man's success seemed to diminish the other's achievements. When Seve won with spectacular shot-making, it made Faldo's methodical approach seem boring. When Faldo won with steady precision, it made Seve's wild swings seem reckless. They never became friends, even after retirement. Their rivalry represented a fundamental question about golf itself. 10. The Snake Charmer. How Trevino got inside Jack's head. Lee Trevino discovered something that no one else had figured out. Jack Nicklaus could be rattled. While other players tried to match Nicklaus's intensity and focus, Trevino took the opposite approach. He turned golf into a psychological chess match, using humor, chatter, and calculated gamesmanship to disrupt the Golden Bear's legendary concentration. The most famous example came before their 1971 U.S. Open playoff at Marion. As they stood on the first tee, Trevino pulled a rubber snake from his golf bag and tossed it at Nicklaus. The crowd laughed, Nicklaus smiled uncomfortably, and Trevino had already won the first battle. He understood that Nicklaus thrived on routine and solemnity, so he made sure there was neither. Throughout the playoff, Trevino kept up a steady stream of jokes and observations, talking to the crowd, the caddies, and anyone who would listen. Nicklaus, accustomed to playing in focused silence, found himself distracted and off his rhythm. Trevino won the playoff by 3 strokes, proving that sometimes the best way to beat a superior player is to make them play your game instead of theirs. The strategy worked repeatedly. At the 1972 Open Championship at Muirfield, Trevino chipped in twice on the final day to beat Nicklaus again. Each time he celebrated with theatrical flair, knowing that his exuberance was the perfect contrast to Nicklaus's stoic demeanor. Trevino had found the one weakness in Nicklaus's armor, his need for everything to be perfect. If you're loving this video, you can hit the super thanks button and support our channel. 11. The Grinder versus the Iceman. American pride on the line. Curtis Strange and Nick Faldo battled for supremacy during the late 1980s, with their rivalry representing more than individual achievement. It was about American golf's ability to compete with the emerging European stars. Strange was the blue-collar grinder who won through determination and mental toughness. Faldo was the rebuilt perfectionist who had transformed himself into a major championship machine. Their most significant confrontations came at consecutive U.S. Opens. In 1988 at the Country Club, Strange won his first major in a playoff, establishing himself as America's premier player. The following year at Oak Hill, he successfully defended his title, becoming the first player since Ben Hogan to win back-to-back U.S. Opens. But Faldo was building his own major championship resume, winning 3 Masters and 3 Open Championships during the same period. Their rivalry became a proxy for the broader competition between American and European golf. Strange represented the traditional American values of hard work and perseverance. Faldo embodied the new European approach of technical perfection and mental discipline. The tension between them was professional rather than personal, but it was real nonetheless. Strange felt that European players received too much credit for their success, while Faldo believed that American players were overrated based on past achievements. Their rivalry helped define an era when golf was becoming truly international. Strange's back-to-back U.S. Open victories proved that American golf could still produce champions, but Faldo's 6 major championships demonstrated that the European challenge was real and lasting. Their rivalry marked the end of American dominance and the beginning of golf's global era. Thanks for watching all the way here. You can continue watching our next video here.